Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and joining me today, the Jeff Goldblum to my Will Smith, A1, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Mr. Brian, you know, I thought Independence Day was, like a week or two ago, but it looks like some people are gearing up to go out in the desert here in September. What's going on, my friend?
It is our Independence Day, and I'm not going to do that speech because that is neither one of those people that you mentioned. I'll just say I'm cool with being Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum's cool.
No, come on, man. What is that? The apartments.com or whatever commercial? I mean, that's just, you know what? He's an acquired taste. I like him in Independence Day. I liked him in Thor Ragnarok. There's other movies I liked him in. Jurassic Park movies, you could, take it or leave it at points. But I picked him because you wear glasses and he does as well in all these roles. So I felt it fit. I felt the shoe fit.
Okay, I'll take it. Like I said, I think he's kind of cool. Plus, he's got a giant statue of him pretending to be sexy in some park someplace. I don't know where that is.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I don't know. I always wonder, what actors think of something like that. Like, take, for example, Rocky, Sylvester Stallone having a statue based on a fictitious character that he played that just is up perpetually in Philadelphia. I mean, that's kind of crazy. I wonder what people think of that. It's kind of cool because it's pop culture-ish, and the movie winning an Oscar and running up the stairs and everything. It's iconic. So, but I mean, it just doesn't, you got Rocky and then you look you look the other direction and there's Ben Franklin. Is there any comparison? I mean, I really don't know. We didn't live in Ben Franklin's time. Maybe Ben Franklin will, some of these people, maybe they weren't as important as we put them up to be. You never know. But anyways, I digress. I was just talking, American historical figure, all the inventions and other things with Ben Franklin, and then, hey, yo, Adrian. And nothing gets that either, man. I mean, Sylvester Stallone wrote, directed, produced. He does all these things, man. I mean, the guy's uber talented. But we went off on a tangent. The reason I mentioned Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum is Independence Day and, fighting all the aliens and going to Area 51. And that's what all these people are talking about on the internet right now. And it's just like all over social media. It's the Area 51 memes. It's all these people who believe they're going to storm Area 51 and not all die from some bizarre vaporizing alien technology that's hidden, 50 stories below the Earth's surface or whatever in a secret government containment facility. But aside from that, I thought it would be fun. And, this kind of sucks. We had this on deck and we didn't have a chance to record it yet, and some other people are already picking up the idea. So no, we didn't borrow this from anybody else. We were thinking about it was just an off-the-cuff thing. What if you could take any, let's say current Steelers, because then we could say a couple former Steelers too, and I think it'll be pretty easy. It's actually kind of easy to pick current Steelers. If you had to pick, I don't know, what number's good? 3? I don't know, 5 might be too many, because then, you're getting into should you take Chris Boswell with you to Area 51? Who would you take with you to Area 51? I mean, there's a default answer for this already that's built in. I'll throw out there before you have the opportunity, and that's Alejandro Villanueva, because Army Ranger, large man, mountain of a man. Why wouldn't you bring him with you? You know what I mean? I don't know. Who else would you pick, Brian?
Well, this is pretty easy for me because there is only one OGGAM.
Yes,
as I
knew you were going
decide to use acronyms constantly. So, and on top of that, Cam Hayward is a little bit of a nerd. So he would probably be into this because, every now and then on the Twitterverse, he throws out a little nerdy stuff and I dig it. So I'd take the grown ass man.
Yeah. I knew you were going to probably pick Cam Hayward. I had another option as well. I thought it would be a pretty cool guy to take along, and that's Juju, because I mean he could be a liability he's still a young guy, but he plays like Fortnite and stuff. So he has to have some idea on how these first person shooters and these video games, he has to have some clue. So you're talking about being a little nerdy or whatever. Myself, I'm thinking if you were to ask somebody like, let's say this was all like real. I don't know if Cam Hayward would be on board. I don't know if Vince Williams would be on board. And these guys be like, forget that. I mean, aside from the fact that they're, NFL players who make, a lot of money and have families and everything. I'm throwing all that out the window. I'm just looking at this from the surface of a total hypothetical cool kind of standpoint. Past and present, I'm kind of wondering, you go past and present. Ben Roethlisberger has this turkey shoot thing that he does all the time. And I'm wondering what kind of is he like a sniper, like secret, we don't know about. He just kind of hides in the bushes and, patiently waits hours in order to take down his prey. I mean, that could be very sneaky. And, he's a big guy, but he's not as fast as he used to be. So, if we get caught, it's like, sorry, Ben. Although I'm not as fast as I used to be either. Josh Dobbs would probably be the interesting guy. You want him to run point somewhere. He's operating the headsets. He has a bunch of laptops out. He's the rocket scientist. He's your strategy type guy. He's the one in the truck if you watch Mission Impossible. So I just thought it'd be kind of interesting. Vance McDonald, he's like he's a Vanimal. He's an intense guy. I think he would just go all Leroy Jenkins. If anybody doesn't know that reference, you'll just have to look it up. But I could see him going just totally off the wall and just against all plans and just berserker mode against everybody. And obviously past and present. I think you got to throw James Harrison and Brett Keisel out there too. Why not?
Yeah, why not? Debo would be great to take. Keisel would be great. He's a hunter. He does hunting stuff. He would be good to take. There's a lot of people that would be good to take. I think you could take pretty much anybody on the. How about Troy?
I don't know. I mean,
Troy is leaping over fences the way he leaps over defensive lines, getting into the area 51 backfield and tackling the general or whatever. I don't know.
But if it came down to a firefight with aliens, I don't know that Troy would be busting skulls like James Harrison or Brett Keisel would be. I just don't see it.
He might try and talk them into surrendering. Very softly say. Look, it's all peace and love here on Earth, man. Just chill.
Maybe like one of those silent kind types, like ninja types, like a John Wick that just kind of infiltrates an area. Maybe he doesn't kill everyone, but he hits the nerve that makes people pass out in their neck and stuff like that. So, but anyways,
I dig that. Now that I dig that.
I can see him doing that, or in the Terminator movies when he told him not to kill anyone and he just started shooting everybody in the leg. Maybe something like that. So. But anyways, there's absolutely no reason. I wanted to say there was a reason for bringing all this up. There was absolutely no reason. It's still June. We're a week out from training camp. We are going to compare some past to present type stuff for today's show. But, there's one other thing that's going on social media, Brian. It's this age filter thing. And I was just wondering, when you run your picture through it, does it just show like a skeleton with no skin or hair or anything? It's like one of those biology skeletons that hangs up because, it's supposed to age you and you're already very old.
I don't know what you're talking about.
He doesn't use the face tweets. Anyways, no, there's this thing there's some app. I won't use it because I don't put my picture out there because it's like I wear a tinfoil hat and believe everything's a conspiracy. Actually, no, I thought it was stupid and I don't care to see what I'm going to look like in 30, 40 years. But you take a picture or selfie of yourself or process another photo and it ages you and kind of shows you what you would look like. And there's some funny ones out there. There's a lot of NFL guys that are doing these and then they're running ones. I saw one for the Browns that was really funny because it was I want to say it was Odell Beckham, and his tattoos didn't age at all. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, that's how you know this is only a simulation. So, but the rest of them had these gray beards. It adds what do I want to say? I didn't want to say some freckles and other aging, but wrinkles and stuff like that, baggy eyes, and it makes you look like Fred Sanford. So that's basically, I think, the idea of the app. But anyways, we wanted to look at the 2018 Pittsburgh Steelers I guess we're going to go back to week one's probably the fairest depth chart and or roster to look at, since that was right after the preseason, it was right after the cuts. It's a 53-man roster. And we kind of want to compare it to what the Steelers are going into now, maybe heading into training camp here, and talk about, are they better or worse than last year? Because, we're still getting, a lot of hate mail over the last 3 episodes or so after we talked about, the Browns, Bengals, and Ravens, and, literally how we don't know anything of what we're talking about. Where do these guys get their stats? I pull up stats from the NFL media websites we have access to. It's the same stuff that's on NFL.com. I pull up stuff from ProFootballReference.com, who's a partner site of ours. And then some of this, I actually compile using spreadsheets and things of that nature, and they're just, they're proprietary to me. I go and I find some of these stats. I'll pull them off of, PFR, and then I'll start doing calculations, and that's where I find things such as, Eli Manning being comparable to Baker Mayfield last year, or Jarvis Landry being comparable to Tyler Boyd, or when somebody got mad about Lamar Jackson and, Greg Roman's been, we didn't mention Greg Roman becoming the OC and how that was a change too for the Ravens. And they're like, well, he's been there for a few years. I think we glossed over it, and it's like, no, he's a first-year OC. He's been, not in the NFL, but for that team, he's been like the tight ends coach and something, and like a quarterback's coach. He's been floating around different positions. And when I said Lamar Jackson, we made the comment, he reminds us of Tim Tebow. I pulled up stats where it looks very comparable, with the exception of Lamar Jackson carries the ball a heck of a lot more, but they don't throw the ball a whole lot. They had about the same TDs and interceptions, the same amount of getting sacked and fumbles too, although Lamar Jackson's kind of cornered the market on that with his rookie season. And we only have 7-8 games of Lamar Jackson to kind of see and look at and get an idea of, and everybody gets their panties in the bunch over all this stuff, and we think it's going to be a competitive AFC North. But I think the biggest thing is we talk about the Steelers, we're obviously geared towards the Steelers. It isn't like we don't think the Steelers are going to be good. Unlike everyone else in the world that said, oh my God, they lost the playoffs, they're falling off, Ben's getting old, they lost AB, they lost Bell. We look at these things and we're like, really? Because, Ben led the league in passing, and, Antonio Brown was, we're talking about this comparing, the rosters. Let's start right there. I mean, there's no Antonio Brown, but how does that really affect the Steelers 2019? I think you get rid of somebody that you didn't realize was that big of a drag on the team. Maybe was he a drag on the field? Maybe. We don't know if he's demanding the ball or what he's saying in the huddle and things of that nature, what goes on sometimes in the locker rooms and behind closed doors. It sounds like that he was a handful that to whoever had to deal with these problems, be it Mike Tomlin, other people in the coaching staff, organization, and other players, and he was a drag that's no longer there. So while his production was high, do we think that's more a product of also playing with Ben Roethlisberger and also Randy Fichtner being very pass-happy in year one as an OC? And do we think it's really going to hurt the team that Antonio Brown isn't there on the field versus the off-the-field baggage that came with it? I'm going to say the Steelers, it's hard to replace a guy that's an all-pro and a Pro Bowl guy. He was starting to get dinged a little with some injuries here or there. We talked about turning age 31 and how wide receivers fall off a cliff. I mean, if he had another year or two left, would you have liked to have seen that in a black and gold jersey? I can't argue that. I always loved AB. But at the same time, the Steelers would have had to move on sometime here in the near future, and we're getting to see what that looks like now in 2019. And overall, as a team unit, no I in team, I think they're going to be better for it.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about always liking AB. It's not that I dislike AB, but to pull my old schoolness up, John Stallworth is my receiver, man. That's the kind of receiver I want. I want a guy who just does his damn job, and is a team first kind of guy. It's not that John Stallworth wasn't in Bradshaw's ear saying, give me the ball, but when he didn't get it, he didn't go throw the Gatorade cooler around. And when he didn't get it, he didn't have a hissy fit. He just went, all right, give it to me the next time. Do it. Okay, I'm open. He just kept asking. Look, here's the thing, and we've talked about this in past episodes, and I feel like it gets overlooked a lot. But there were times where it was just inexplicable in our minds why Ben is trying to hit AB on a certain route or a certain pass when he's triple covered or quadruple covered, or somebody threw a tarpaulin over him, but Ben's still trying to get him the ball. And you have to wonder how much is too much being in your ear, and how there were times last season and really over the last 2 seasons where AB reminded me of a chihuahua. Yappity, 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 yap. He's like, and I hate chihuahuas. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate mail about that, or, people are going to tell me chihuahuas are great. Chihuahuas are little rats, and I don't like them at all, and I hate their little yappiness. And if I had a little yappy chihuahua in my ear all the time, I would be like, oh, geez, fine, I'll just throw you the ball. Or I'd kick him. I don't know. Since you probably can't kick AB.
You can't kick the dog. Who cares about AB? Kick AB.
Dog, it's a rat. Anyway, so I get it, and I can't help but think that AB is an all-world talent. There's no question about that. He is a self-made guy. He made himself as good as he is. But with that being said, having the opportunity to play with Ben Roethlisberger feeds that. I'm not going to say Ben made AB, because I think AB would be good, maybe even great anywhere during that time frame, simply because of his own desire and chip on his shoulder to prove that everybody else was wrong. But would he be as good without Ben? I don't know the answer to that, and I kind of think no, because they're balls that Ben puts balls places other guys can't put them, and we'll have to wait and see how he handles life with Derek Carr and what happens there, and how the Gru dog or Chucky doll, whatever you want to call John Gruden, how he manages to deal with this personality, after a couple games when Carr doesn't target AB as much as he wants to be targeted. So to wrap that all up, I do agree with you in the sense that I think removing AB from the locker room, removing AB from the receivers room, I think there's a sense of relief of not having to deal with that nonsense that I think almost all of them will feel. They're not going to get asked about it. They are, let's be honest, all season long they're going to get asked, what do you think about AB not being here? And if he has a great season in Oakland, it's going to be, don't you wish he was here? And if they don't perform, then the questions will keep coming. But they don't have to be asked about the drama anymore. And they can easily answer these other questions simply by saying, I want to talk about the guys that are in our locker room. So they can brush all that off. And I think that's a big relief that will help these guys stay more focused, more relaxed, and just play ball. On top of which, I think the receiver room as a whole will end up being more productive now.
Yeah. There's a whole lot to chew on there. I mean, let's just hop over to Bell real quick before we're going to go with some of the groups actually, but this is the other thing that people bring up. This is where everybody's like, okay, how could you like the Steelers winning the AFC North? Didn't you see Lamar Jackson and the Ravens? They won this division last year, after the bye week, and they installed Jackson in here. It's a different offense, and they go from, 4-5. It was pretty much when everybody lost to the Steelers, their season turned around last year. How weird that is. But, they went with Lamar Jackson. They beat the Bengals, Raiders, Falcons. Lost an OT to the Chiefs. That's one of the weird ones where it was over at Arrowhead. And the Chiefs were far too happy to turn the ball over in that game and just make boneheaded plays. That was a frustrating game because when you dislike the Ravens as much as I do, and I'm sure you do too, when you see something like that happen and the other team just keeps keeping people in the game and you want to see the other team lose because let's face it, your team, the Steelers, were doing so hot around the same period of time, and the division was slipping away. And you're just like, really, this is like one of the best teams in football right now, and one of the favorites to win the AFC, and they're beating them at home, and they're going toe to toe with them. But then it was the Buccaneers. Okay, the Chargers were a playoff team, and then the Browns. But of those, what are we talking about? 7 games. What, like 2 of them were a real challenge, and they went 1-1 in them? I mean, come on, folks. I mean, seriously. Now I understand the Steelers tied the Browns last year. They had their own problems with the Raiders, the X-ray machine and everything else, and leaving a backup in. But they absolutely plastered the Falcons. They pretty much handled the Buccaneers too, even though that game got tighter toward the end. But I'm just trying to paint a picture here. We already talked about the Ravens in that other episode and how they start their season, and you have the Browns fans jumping in and saying the same things. And I'm like, well, what did the Steelers really lose? They got rid of the locker room cancer that was Antonio Brown, and we're going to talk about the wide receivers and whether they're better or for worse. They still have Ben Roethlisberger, and even though he threw 16 picks, when you're blowing up Baker Mayfield here, he threw 13, 14, so he's not far behind. And Ben led the league in interceptions because nobody threw interceptions last year, or several teams were using multiple quarterbacks, where your lousy quarterbacks just didn't have enough attempts, enough chances to give the ball away as they normally would. And Ben threw the ball overwhelmingly more than anybody else did last year as well. So I mean, you get these dumb comments about, okay, Antonio Brown, I think that's a legitimate concern. That's a big hole to fill, and I think they have the means to fill it. I think they had extra firepower in Juju Smith-Schuster being there as a wide receiver too, where he slides into wide receiver 1, where that makes it, less worrisome. And when you look at all the other problems that the Steelers had, we're going to go on the defensive side of the ball and whatever that they fixed there and what they added. This is the reason we still think they're an AFC North competitor. We talk about how they gave games away. You look at Denver, Xavier Grimble's fumble. You look at Ben throwing the pick at the end of that game. You look at the Oakland game overall, where Ben wasn't sent back out there, and you have Josh Dobbs, getting his first action ever in an NFL game, and going 3 and out, and they turn the ball over, and Boswell missing field goals there, missing field goals week 1 in Cleveland, and the slop that was that weather and field and everything that's there. You look at the Chargers game with the false start and the 2 missed blocks in the pack and the punt return, both leading to touchdowns. And you look at the Saints game that was toe-to-toe, and that phantom throw the ball over Alvin Kamara's head, throw it over Joe Hayden's head too, and we're going to call pass interference and give you the ball on the 1-yard line so you could punch it in. Any one of those things, I understand people are going to come out of the woodwork. Well, you got to play the game the way it's called. Well, they did, and unfortunately, if any one of those things was called, would have turned out differently, performance-wise, either by the players, Xavier Grimble secures the ball, for example. Ben doesn't throw a pick. Or the officials actually, have their glasses on and see a false start that led to a touchdown. The Steelers win an extra game. They win a division. They're in the playoffs. And then you're not having this conversation of everybody else winning the AFC North instead of the Steelers. They still have the best quarterback in the league, okay? Or not in the – well, you know what? I went a little further. I went to say division, but one of the best quarterbacks in the league. As much as I love Ben, it's a little tough. I don't know. You still got, Tom Brady and Drew Brees. I'm realistic there, okay? I understand. Not Aaron Rodgers, by the way. So don't throw him in there.
Yeah, please
don't. But where I'm going at with the quarterback at least is, there's a proven guy. There's not like a second-year starter or a guy that's never accomplished anything like an Andy Dalton. This is Ben Roethlisberger, future Hall of Famer, guy that holds practically every meaningful record in franchise history, that has 2 Super Bowl rings, has played in 3 of the big games, and is more than capable. So when you get guys, I don't know if you saw this, Brian, but it was David Carr and Brandon Boykin talking about the Steelers' offensive expectations, and then saying that they didn't have a backup quarterback, and it's like, well, all of a sudden we're comparing teams based on backup quarterbacks. If we're going to do that, then they automatically win the division because Josh Dobbs and Mason Rudolph are going to be light years ahead of, RG3 and who is it, Drew Stanton in Cleveland, and there's a rookie, Lindley or whatever the heck his name is. The guy hasn't even played yet for the Bengals. I would take either of the other two guys. I'd bring Landry Goat back, and I would still make the same type of statement. I mean, it's kind of stupid to assume that the Steelers are going to be bad just because one player is gone in Antonio Brown on that side of the ball. And these people, I don't know. It's June. I get it. We were talking about space aliens a second ago. So talking about the backup quarterbacks, maybe not as much out of this world. I don't know. I guess it comes with the territory and not having a lot to talk about. But I think you get where I'm going with this. I think the quarterback position is going to be even stronger this year because of the reasons you said. Ben's not forcing the ball to one specific guy. Those younger guys, Rudolph and Dobbs, who will be battling for a backup spot in camp, or so we assume, they're going to be able to show us more. They have more experience under their belt. So the quarterback position is already stronger, no matter what David Carr. Too many hits to the head, I think, for David Carr.
Yeah, I just want to note it's July. But that's okay.
I'm sorry, June, July. What difference does it make?
Month.
There's no football.
They're the same month.
There's no football.
Same.
Yeah, I must have said June like 3 or 4 times too. I mean, totally brain dead here. Time for coffee.
Yeah, I look. There's no question. Like, I also want to mention, and you've already said this, but I want to reiterate it. That people are going to go, oh, well, they lost Bell. No, they didn't lose Bell. Bell was already gone. So they got through last year without Le'Veon Bell. This is not a new subtraction, the fact that Le'Veon Bell isn't coming back. Once he held out, he was never coming back anyway, and everybody knew it. So he didn't play at all anywhere last year, and he certainly didn't play for the Steelers. So I think you can ignore they lost Le'Veon Bell. They didn't. They lost Antonio Brown, and they kind of lost Antonio Brown before the season ended anyway.
Yeah.
So I just look at this and I think Ben hears the talk too, and he's an and anybody who will talk to you about Ben Roethlisberger will tell you he's an ultimate competitor. He is super competitive. He wants to win at everything he does. And he hears everybody saying, oh, he's not going to be as good without Antonio Brown. He is going to go out of his way to have the best season he can possibly have. I think he's going to be hyper-focused to prove people wrong. And I think he's got a group of guys that can help him do that. I think people are sleeping on Kreef, on Dante Moncrief. We've talked about it I'm not. It's not that I think he's going to be able to put up Antonio Brown numbers, but I think he will put up solid, good numbers, be a target that they can use, someone who can help stretch the field. I think Juju is going to have another Juju-type year, and I think James Washington is going to prove why they picked him in the second round and have if not a breakout season, something close to it. You've got a core here that I think can do some things. And that's not even, talking about the rest of the guys that are in that locker room. There's one other thing I have to mention because I'm at work the other day and I walk into the break room and it was time for breakfast and I was going to make my lovely frozen English muffin, bacon, egg, and cheese frozen crap sandwich that I eat.
No, wait a second. You don't eat breakfast food. This sounds just preposterous, but
that's not true. I just don't eat toast.
No, you just eat horrible breakfast food.
Well, yeah, but that's look, I'm limited to what's available at the little community marketplace there at the office. Anyway, we have 2 giant screen TVs in the break room, and I look up and I read Mayfield of Dreams.
Oh, dear Lord!
And I'm just like, oh my God! We get accused of being on people's nuts, but man. This is the reason. It's not that we're scared of the Browns. It's not that we think the Browns are going to be horrible or that they're going to be great. It's that the hype around the Browns is so absolutely ridiculous. And the love fest with Baker Mayfield without anything really substantial to base it on is absurd.
It is. I mean, I can't say enough about that. I like what you said about the receivers. If you look at last year's roster, so the quarterbacks were basically the same heading in, and I went on week one's depth chart, and of course, Le'Veon Bell never did show, so that was somebody that was penciled in. That's another thing that people were constantly asked about week to week, and then you had to have him show like things on a jet ski or send out some type of tweet, and they're all distractions, and those distractions are gone. When you used to talk about the killer bees, the other guy that was shipped out last year too, but earlier, was Martavis Bryant. And for all the more intents and purposes here of these explosive killer bees offenses, let's talk about Martavis Bryant for a second. Rookie year, 10 games that he appeared in. He only got thrown at 48 times, 26 receptions, 549 yards, 8 touchdowns, a lot of long bomb type stuff, right? Deep balls, 94-yard long. Next season, kind of, I guess you would say maybe his breakout year before the suspension, 50 catches, 765 yards, 6 touchdowns. Suspended in 2016, plays in 2017, nearly a full season. He was, I think, hurt right out the gate. But 15 games instead of the 10 because he was partially suspended and hurt as well in 2015 and missed 5 games. So then he misses a full year. He comes back. 84 targets, but 50 receptions, 603 yards. And if you're talking about like the targets versus the catch in the percentage here, if you recall Ben making some comments about him getting his mind straight on some things too. So 50 receptions, 603 yards, 3 touchdowns. So when you're looking at that and you look, and I'm trying to bring up the full average here. We'll see if I can actually get the whole thing. Over the first 2 years, his yearly average was 38 receptions, 657 yards. And, when you look at 765 as his main baseline, or you're looking at something to the effect of, over the 3 seasons, okay, it's in that 639 range, 42 catches or so. That's just saying an average per game of, let me see. It says over a 16-game season, 56 receptions, 852 yards. You're talking about Dante Moncrief for sleeping on him. I think he can do the Martavis Bryant numbers very easily, especially for the Martavis being available type numbers.
Absolutely.
Quite easily. So when you compare, I mean, a lot of people were excited last year. Of course, it's Antonio Brown. Juju Smith-Schuster gave us a lot of promise in his rookie season and more than delivered in his sophomore year. So we know he's the real deal. He's going to be the wide receiver 1. You're looking for another guy that could come in, and when that guy was anybody but Juju, and we talked about this before too, there usually aren't a whole lot of teams that have 2 1,000-yard receivers, and even when the Steelers have had that maybe mixed success versus spreading the ball around to several players. So we don't need another 1,000-yard receiver. You just need somebody to come in that can catch around 40 to 50 balls for 700-800 yards, and Dante Moncrief can do that. I believe James Washington could do that too, but his one of these guys, their volume is going to be a little higher than the other, just based on the Steelers don't run 3 wide receiver sets for everything that they do. There's a lot of different packages where they only have 2 guys, and maybe they run 2 tight ends, or they throw a fullback in, or something of that nature, and then even then, they throw the jumbo package, and you're going to dot the it's not really the I. It's not the I formation, but you get the idea. The top of the formation or whatever, there might be Juju. He's the only wide receiver who's out there because he's probably the best blocker that they have as well at the position. And maybe they run a play action, and then Juju ends up with more stats that way. Who knows? But I do believe, they didn't have Ryan Switzer until after the preseason. So even heading into camp, when you have like a contingent of Juju and James Washington and Dante Moncrief, and they didn't have Eli Rogers either because he was hurt. Ryan Switzer, and then rookie Deontay Johnson. I'm going to take that, even though it's not Antonio Brown. Juju's a push. He's still there. James Washington, second year, not a rookie. But over Justin Hunter and Darius Hayward-Bay, I like what I see with the receivers. Now, just to throw this out on the other end of the spectrum here with the running backs, since you mentioned Bell, and I got told, Steelers have a great offensive line. He's a product of, the system and everything of that nature, because we made the same comment about Kareem Hunt and Hunt going from, Kansas City to Cleveland and saying he's an Andy Reid guy. Make no bones about it. If James Conner's in a different backfield, I don't know that I like him as much as I do in the Steelers' backfield. And you could say the same thing about who the Steelers have in reserve, too. Jalen Samuels and then Benny Snell. So I think the running back group is definitely stronger than when they had Ridley as a reserve guy last year. Also, it looks stronger. I can't make the same comment about Antonio Brown, but with the running backs, I definitely can. When you get rid of all these other killer Bs, they should be killer Ds. They were distractions. And you get rid of them, and you look overall as the offense, you still have Vance McDonald as a starter. I understand, Jesse James is gone, reliable to some degree, but, is what it is. The tight end group might be a little weaker. Offensive line's basically the same thing. Marcus Gilbert was hurt, even though he was around a little bit last year. So they're basically the same offensive line. There's one wide receiver gone. It's all the starters coming back. And even if James Conner is behind a great offensive line, he's still an athlete. He's still a player that should be respected for what he's capable of doing. And because he is behind that offensive line, you can't take it away from him one way or another. I'm not going to fictitiously put him on another team because there's so many other guys I could put on other teams, and they're gonna suck. You could put Ezekiel Elliott with the Arizona Cardinals. What do you think he's going to do? You know what I mean? Or Todd Gurley. What was he going to do last year? He didn't do nothing. David Johnson kind of disappeared too from that. So it's kind of an irrelevant argument. I know you're trying to place pieces because there's a lot of moving parts in Cleveland, and that's the reason why we think, there's not as many moving parts here with the Steelers. The only guy they got to push out is the guy that's the headache, Antonio Brown. They already know what life after Bell's like, and then they're just bringing in a few guys that are reserves and depth, and it's just going to make the team stronger.
Yeah, I just look at it exactly that way. This is, anybody who's there gets two benefits, right, on the offensive side of the ball. They get the benefit of playing with a fantastic offensive line, one of the top three, if not the top offensive lines in the league. That in the all by itself can make everybody on the offense better. They also get a Hall of Fame quarterback that they get to play with in Ben Roethlisberger. So that helps elevate all the receivers' games. It helps elevate the running backs as well. And I agree with you. I have said since Bell has started the whole process. I'm saying this repeatedly. Wait until the season starts. Wait until he goes to another team that doesn't understand the way he likes to run, that doesn't have the same quality offensive line that the Steelers have, and let's see what happens. Because I just don't see it. And I don't think other teams see it either, which is very clearly why he did not get paid what he thought he was going to get paid. I will say the one trend-setting thing he might have done is put this idea in all running backs' minds now that Melvin Gordon is saying he has to get paid or he's not going to play, that they're undervalued. Look, maybe you are, but at the same time,
yeah,
it's just you got to pay what the league is doing, and the league is throwing the ball. So sorry, guys, it's just the way it works. And I'm sorry that you feel $8 to $10 million a year is undervalued, regardless. But okay, to get back to this point, the Steelers have a group in that offensive line that is better than most teams, and that helps. It's part of why James Conner was able to do what he does. It's part of why Ben is able to now throw the ball the way he's been throwing it, because he gets better protection. I look at this group and I feel like this is a year where Ben is going to maybe there's only 1,000-yard guy, but there could be multiple 800 yards guys on this squad. I think the ball is going to get spread around a lot. I think you're going to have touchdowns in multiple receivers are going to have 6 to 8 touchdowns. You throw the tight ends into that mix. You throw James Conner into that mix as a receiver. This is an offense that. What was the whole point of this that you started this with? That the morons on NFL Network decided that that the reason the Steelers' offense wasn't as good is because they didn't have a backup quarterback.
Yeah.
Get the hell out of here.
I mean,
I think it's going to be a better offense. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean I think they're going to put up 40 points a game, but I think that they're going to be a better offensive team, more consistent, more consistently able to move the ball and score, regardless of whether they put up the same number of points. I think that is a benefit to the team. They're going to be able to chew clock. They're going to be able to move the ball. And overall, I feel like the offense looks to me like it could be a better group than what they had last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's the entire thing, and we got to get over to the defensive side of the ball, and that bodes, this question here, Brian, is, when you're looking at what the Steelers had, what was their problem last year, pretty much? Do you think offense was their problem, or do you think defense was their problem? There are specific parts of the defense, even down to that metric.
Yeah, I would say there are specific parts of the defense that were at issue. And people are going to point out Roethlisberger's interceptions, but again, I'm going to point out it for a guy leading the league in interceptions, it was the lowest number in forever, if not the history of the league, which is what I think it actually was.
Yeah.
And so, it's not the interceptions that were the problem. It was not being able to close out teams late in the game. And unfortunately, I think that was very specifically some parts of the defense and those guys in those other uniforms that always seem to be playing for the other team.
Well, and the Steelers had a big problem was with Todd Haley was red zone offense, and they were the top red zone offense last year. So when I hear about all the Baker Mayfield stuff and throwing a bunch of stuff in the red zone and stuff like that, it's like, okay, great for him, but you're forgetting where the Steelers are coming from with this. Going into last year, going into camp, going into the season, I don't think any of us think offense was a problem. I don't think we should think offense is a problem this year either, even though there is maybe one extra part or new part that's going to be there. It's more, I think there's you're taking Antonio Brown's 104 catches, almost 1,300 yards, 15 TDs, and trying to figure out how that gets spread around. And we talked about that same thing when Mike Wallace left, or Santonio left, or even Jericho Cotchery when he had 10 TDs that one year. It was like, oh my goodness, he was such a big scorer. How can we replace this guy? And it was like they're all afterthoughts now. You know what I mean? And they're just going to they're going to move on. That's what Mike Tomlin does. Even when there's an injury in the middle of the season, it's the standard's the standard. It's the next guy up. There isn't a whole lot of panic. They're going to make do with what they got. And I don't think that there's going to be as big a drop-off as people believe. I think Juju will have more touchdowns. I don't know that, he can have very many more receptions, but you don't know. We saw Antonio Brown catch 130 balls almost consistently all the time. So 111 for 1426, it's probably where Juju's at. The rest gets spread around. I mean, Ryan Switzer wasn't ingrained as much in the offense. He gets a full training camp, things of that nature. It's still the same offensive line. It's still the same running back. There's more depth now at, behind. You have an experienced Jalen Samuels behind James Conner. You have Benny Snell behind him. Matt Filer was already a guy who was playing right tackle in place of Marcus Gilbert. Very little drop off here, okay? Even if you go back, 2 seasons, as crazy as it'll sound, I think the bigger problem that everyone had wasn't offense, it was defense, because they lost, Ryan Shazier. There were still problems in the secondary. And, you look around, this is the reason why I still think the Steelers should be considered a favorite or the favorite in the AFC North. Notwithstanding having the Bengals losing another offensive lineman to retirement now since we recorded that. Jeez.
Oh, man.
Yeah, did you see that? Clint Bowling on the way out now, too. So be remiss to mention that. So it's like the left guard, and then which side was Daniels going to play on? He was one of the tackles, left or right tackle. I can't remember the guy that they drafted. So, it's just... You look at problems that other teams have. There were some compelling arguments from the Ravens commenters that we had over on YouTube. And, to the point where, it gave me some consideration. Okay, I never said I didn't like, Judon or URA and some of these other guys. it's just a matter of how's that all going to mix, because we're talking about, 6 returning starters? The Steelers have like 9 returning starters, and they took a stud linebacker in a position that has been killing them for the last year and a half since Ryan Shazier got hurt, and a guy for all intents and purposes that looks to jump in there, and there will be some growing pains as a rookie, but, I don't think the Ravens do they really have the guy that's going to fill in, or somebody's like, oh, well, he outperformed C.J. Mosley. I mean, we used to have that pipe dream too. We thought John Bostic was going to come in and just be that guy, or L.J. Fort or whatever, and it didn't work. You know what I mean? And you look at what you got from last year's defense, it's still the same defensive line. I think Cam Hayward gets overlooked a lot for having 20 sacks over the last 2 years and being a Pro Bowl, near all-pro caliber guy, because being a defensive end in a 3-4 just doesn't get the same love in the NFL overall when you're talking about it, for whatever reason. Javon Hargrave continues to excel as well. Stephon Tuitt, we've mentioned whatever needs to be done with him. He's been more than solid, but he's one of the highest paid guys on the team. We might want a little bit more there, but it's all the same. Tyson Alualu, Dan McCullers, and then who's my other guy I'm thinking of? Isaiah Buggs is now maybe the fill-in for L.T. Walton there. So that's the change. Maybe even stronger. I mean, Buggs looks like he could be another a Hargrave type. So when you're flopping out Hargrave with Hargrave version 2, that could be very problematic, especially when the guys, fresh off the bench, and the other guys have been fighting in the trenches for 2 quarters on the opposing offensive line. TJ Watt, huge year last year, you know what I mean? We've always talked about Dupree and Vince Williams, but now you don't have to deal with Bostic and LJ Fort, and what else? We were talking about Matthew Thomas. We were talking about Tyler Matakevich. I know Matakevich is still there, but there's a lot of competition because they drafted some guys too, like Ulysses Gilbert that'll be there, and Mark Barron, who, we still don't know where all he's going to float around until we get these guys to start coming out to camp and we see where they start placing him for what we believe is right now it's inside linebacker 1A and B between Barron and Bush. But bringing him in, Barron and Bush, I think they're both upgrades over Bostic and Fort. I don't think there's any doubt about that, and that's another reason why we don't think the Steelers' defense was horrid. They had difficulty at times getting off the field, but not as bad as it had been when Sean Spence had to fill in and they brought him off the couch, or even in previous years whenever Shazier was banged up, or other problems they had in the secondary, which we'll get to in a second. But overall, the front seven is, I believe, better. Even though it's most of the same parts, those few upgrades with like Bush and Barron, it's better than what they had in 2018.
Yeah, in my mind, there's no question the defense has improved from the standpoint of on paper. Again, this is no different than what we say about the Browns. Until everything is in front of us, until we see how the guys gel together, you never know.
Oh, come on. That's ridiculous.
I know. But
how dare you be realistic?
It appears on paper that they're better. And speaking of being fair and realistic, I want to give one of those Ravens fans props. I hate giving Ravens fans props, but clearly he listened to the whole show. Yeah. As opposed to, I read the title and commented 14 times on just the title because it annoyed me so much. He actually listened to the whole show, and by the end, he said, I got to give you guys credit, because you can't even believe what you're saying, because they always are better than you expect them to be, which is true, and we said that.
I say it all the time because I end up eating my words and just kicking myself in the butt over over whatever the Ravens. I believe, is this fair to say? The Ravens overachieved last year and the Steelers underachieved. Is that the reason why we're so much more bullish on it, aside from us being homers? I think that's the reason why we're more bullish, not to mention some of these changes that the Steelers have made. Notwithstanding, Morgan Burnett is playing for the Browns now. Terrell Edmonds was a capable starter last year. We'll see where he goes in year 2. We saw some flashes of playmaking ability in games. For those of you who had the privilege of seeing these guys practice or training camp or whatever, Terrell Edmonds as well as James Washington look like studs when they're in there against like anybody but the first team, and even against some of their own teammates. They look like premier athletes. But then when you put that against 32 teams in the NFL, they may fall down significantly in those rankings because there's, 32 starting safeties in the NFL. There's 31 other guys besides Edmonds, but they look like the real deal. And if that turns around and there continues to be improvement and progress on the, when it comes to their growth as professionals in year 2, that could only be better for the Steelers. I don't see Sean Davis regressing. I know he doesn't make all these big, huge plays, but he's quietly a guy that, we used to see a lot of missed tackles and stuff from the Steelers, and I thought some of that was a little bit cleaned up last year. Save here or there. It's an NFL problem overall. It's not. I don't think it's ever going to be perfect because of the way the guys practice. And if they go to a new CBA and make things a little softer and easier on guys when it comes to practice, it's probably going to get worse. So, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you look at the secondary. Okay, I'm just going to jump over because I saw something from Mike Hilton, excited to go to camp. I just want him to get his contract. You know what I mean? But I think he's one of the premier nickel guys in the NFL and definitely a pass rusher as well. Who would have thought? 5'9", 184, undrafted, comes to camp out of nowhere, and this guy is rock solid in that position. You had Artie Burns penciled in, or Cody Sensabaugh through pieces of last year, and you could just throw that. We could wipe the slate clean off of that. Now you have Steven Nelson signed to basically a big boy starter money contract opposite Joe Hayden, and when you look at Hayden, Davis, Edmonds in year 2, Nelson and Mike Hilton as basically, the Steelers play a lot of nickel. They have the extra DBs out there. That's a heck of a lot stronger than it was in 2018. I think it's a major improvement. And then you still have Cam Sutton as a reserve, and you still have Justin Lane, who was just drafted, and who knows what Artie Burns. We're pretty much, everybody's kind of written off that he's just going to get cut, but you never know what his role could be, even if it's on special teams. If he's got his head on straight and he's cleaned things up, that could bolster the roster more. If he shows, he's not the player that he was last year. Obviously, if he's the player he was last year, then we're talking about somebody that's he's going to bounce around probably the NFL between a team or two because of being a first-round pick. But he probably won't be on the Steelers roster. I like the overall group there. I didn't talk about the backup safeties, but I mean, you were talking about like Nat Burhay, okay, he's no longer there. I know this is a bone of contention. People think the Steelers necessarily need to sign a safety, but Davis doesn't miss a snap. Edmonds didn't miss any snaps. They still have Marcus Allen that's entering his second year. They still have Jordan Dangerfield that's been a veteran, and he's been proven to be a filling guy. They could add somebody. They have some guys in camp that we'll end up talking about, on some of next week's programming as camp begins. The secondary overall, I think, is overwhelmingly better. I won't even say 2018. I'm going to say since it has been probably in 5 years. Probably since Troy left, or when Troy was starting to get injured and was unavailable in games.
Yeah, I can concur with that. I think that this is probably the group with the most potential since then. It's a group that I think it's worth being excited about. We've really barely talked about Devin Bush because, again, he's a rookie. We don't know how much he's going to contribute, but there's so much Ryan Shazier-like hype around Devin Bush right now. He's so smart. He already knows the playbook. He's like the quarterback out there. He's running with the ones, all those kind of things that we weren't used to hearing about rookies. And we started hearing about Shazier when he came into the league. We're now hearing about Devin Bush. And there's probably a little bit more expectation because we jumped up to get him. But with the additions of Mark Barron and Steven Nelson, and I know I know if what's his name, Suck a Steeler, I can't remember what his name is.
He hasn't been commenting anymore,
No.
probably because if he is listening, we don't mind the comments. I mean, they're fun.
No, not at all.
We're poking fun. We're poking fun. You know what I mean? We get it. We sound. What we're not going to do is come out and say somebody's absolute garbage and trash, because we're part of a football community here where if it wasn't for these guys, we would not be talking about it. So it's completely unfair, not to mention that we're in communication with many of these guys. It would be very awkward to talk trash about one of them, and then all of a sudden it goes through the grapevine. Well, what are these guys saying about me? You know what I mean? And then you're completely you end up like one of our competitors, and you're completely walled off from the locker room. So we're not understand that's part of the reason why we don't say some things. We may think some of the things that some of the folks say in the comments, but it's overwhelmingly why we're more just on an objective, critical basis, no more than what Vince Williams or somebody or Cam Hayward would tweet out about a teammate, or Ben would say on his radio show about a teammate. There is a fine line there, and we also like to tend to think, these are human beings. These are people with families. These are people with feelings. These are people that are in a constant pressure cooker grind to continue to keep playing professional football. It's not a very big window for a lot of players, and it depends on the position you play too. It's a short shelf life, and shorter for some than others, and we like to see everybody have that opportunity and make the most of it as possible, and give them the benefit of the doubt where need be, except for when I see Brandon Boykin has an NFL Network job, and then that kind of irks me, because I'm like, what'd that guy ever do? Give me an NFL Network job. I mean, come on now. So just understand that's where we come from. You were going to go back to whatever he says. We're on whose jock are we on? Steven Nelson, or are we going to say Artie Burns?
Just because we think he's better than Artie Burns, we're all over his jock. I've never actually been on a jock, so I don't know what that actually means. But we're not. It's simply saying that we think Steven Nelson is better than Artie Burns. And I think that's a fair assessment based on what Artie Burns has done the last 2 seasons and what Steven Nelson has done the last 2 seasons. I do not think Steven Nelson is the next Joe Hayden or Rellis Island or, any of that stuff. I don't think he's necessarily a Pro Bowl cornerback. I don't know that he can't become that with the right coaching and with the right team around him. But that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's an improvement. And as a whole, I think it's fair to say the defense appears to be improved. And it makes it really exciting when we start to look at camp coming up shortly to see what these guys can do.
Yeah, so going through the defense, Hayward is still the same. Hargrave's still the same guy. Tuitt's still the same guy. Watt's still the same guy. Dupree's still the same guy. Vince Williams still the same guy. Devin Bush compared to John Bostic. Improvement? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Major improvement. Mark Barron to John Bostic. I would still say a nudge. I know, I just did a show with somebody who covers the Rams and got to talk a little bit about Barron, and basically his deal is his size. It's almost the same thing as Jalen Samuels playing. Does he play tight end, or is he undersized for tight end? Is he fullback? He's bigger than a running back? You know what I mean? Where do you use this guy? And I'm going to even take Barron into the secondary. Barron over Burnett, or let's go back to Will Gay or whoever else they tried to put as a dime backer. Dangerfield did pretty good in that role too, I will say. But I'm going to say Barron's an improvement there too. So what are you looking at here? Joe Hayden's still the same. Sean Davis still the same. Terrell Edmonds still the same. Artie Burns and or Cody Sensabaugh versus Steven Nelson. Improvement or not?
Yeah.
Mike Hilton, provided he is signed and is playing, still the same. Now, if you go to Cam Sutton, I think Cam Sutton has the same tools to be a very similar player, but we don't have enough to go on with that. He's been used in other spots, mainly reserve role. So we'll just go under the assumption Mike Hilton, they get this sorted out. I think he's going to be one of the deals that get talked about early, in the following week or two that maybe get done. He plans on honoring being a teammate and showing up regardless. So with that all said, we said there's 2-3 players added on the defense, and we all said that it's an improvement. Is the Steelers' defense better, or potentially better than they were last year? Yeah. Now you go to the Steelers' offense. Okay, I already struck Marcus Gilbert from the offensive line, so let's just say all 5 starters: Villanueva, Foster, Pouncey, DeCastro, and Filer, the same as it ended last year, all back, all still the same. Vance McDonald, still the same. James Conner, still the same. Rosie Nix, still the same. Big Ben, still the same. Juju, still there. You're looking at 1 or 2 wide receivers. One of those guys, a couple of those guys were already there. If you look at the slot guys, they were already there. That's still the same. So you're looking at Antonio Brown versus potentially Dante Moncrief or James Washington filling that role. Obviously, I'm not going to say that's an improvement, but you take one of those 2 guys versus the other depth that they had, Darius Hayward-Bay, I'm going to say an improvement. So you kind of have the needle go one way and then come back a little bit. It's like playing sorry. You go forward a couple spaces and you go back one. Steelers offense, really that much different from last season? I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I'm distracted because all of a sudden Bob Seger is running through my head because of all the still the sames, and the line that comes up to me when I think of the offense is, you're still damn good.
Yeah.
And, that's just the way it is. They're still a damn good offense. This is an improved team, in my opinion. We said it even before Antonio Brown got traded that if he left, there was a possibility the team actually ends up better than it was. I think this is a better team than it was last year in all aspects, except maybe special teams, and that's only because I haven't seen Boswell kick yet.
And even to that regard, if Boswell's back to his Pro Bowl form, let's say
it's better,
and it's still Jordan Berry, and he doesn't regress and stuff like that, you still got the same kick and punt returner in Ryan Switzer. I mean, there's stability there. There's not a lot of question marks. So overall, the Steelers better potentially. I mean, everything's on paper. Everything's potential. It's July now that I know that.
Yeah.
Then why the heck do we get so much flack? I know the Steelers listeners are out there, and they're just nodding their heads and agreeing, and maybe even more so now after we pointed all this out. I don't understand all the flack that there is from like the David Carrs and people of that. I think it's just something to talk about. I understand Browns fans are excited. They have reason to be. There's a lot of fancy names and things that are thrown up there, along with a lot of young talent on rookie contracts that has, the potential to be, I don't want to say a juggernaut because I still think they have some problems, and those are the problems that are going to be exploited because that's what teams do. It's a chess match. They're going to go after those teams' weaknesses. But when I look at the Steelers' weaknesses, you know what I mean? What really changed? We already knew Bell was gone, and they finally have somebody that's plugged into that inside linebacker role and the opposite cornerback role on the defensive side, where the only thing you really could complain about is who's Ben going to throw the ball to? Well, if he doesn't throw the ball, if he throws the ball 100 times less, he has 3 guys in the backfield he could just hand off to, or even just dump it off to. Maybe that may be more utilized this season. It might change things a little bit from their approach as far as an offense. It's the reason we're still very bullish. I mean, you look at all of the different changes on the Ravens and how many starters and everybody was lost and all these guys got to come in. We're not talking about 1, 2, or 3 spots like we just did with the Steelers. You talk about the Ravens and you're talking about like 13 spots that are getting changed or whatever. Maybe it was like 11. It's like 5 or 6 on each side of the ball. That's crazy, man. I mean, I understand you got some guys you hope to step up, but do you remember when the Steelers tried to do that? When was that? 2012, 2013? Yeah. Well, this guy's just going to come in, and this guy's just going to come in, this guy's just going to come in. We're just going to, we're going to be able to replace Casey Hampton and Aaron Smith and, Larry Foote and James Ferrier, and it's just going to happen, and boom, it's just going to work. We're going to replace James Harrison. Lamar Woodley's hurt. We're going to have somebody else just fill in. The standard's the standard. As much as you want to say that and pound on your chest, Tomlin was lucky those teams even went 8-8. You know what I mean? That's not the same situation here with the Steelers. That is the situation with the Baltimore Ravens. kind of the same situation with the Bengals as they guys continue to drop like flies, you know what I mean? Until they get that offensive line fixed, I think their offense is still going to have their own woes, but they still have proven commodities there. The Browns have commodities that have come from other teams and are now unproven together in the same locker room, and that gives you some uncertainty. This is the overall picture of why we don't think it's doom and gloom, and it's the beginning of the demise for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And please, everyone, don't try and add more players to this roster. They don't have enough cap space. Melvin Gordon's not coming. Anybody else who ends up getting cut or is floating around in free agents, anybody that's available right now is available for a reason. And the reason they're not on an NFL roster is because every one of the 32 NFL teams that are out there are either looking at their payroll and saying we can't afford what this guy wants, or we already have something better that we're going to try on our roster first to see if it clicks. So this is what they're going to war with right now. They're going to go to camp, they're going to report in a week. We'll see if people show up on like tanks and, maybe a UFO or whatever the heck's going to end up happening, or if it's going to be a little more low key than usual. Maybe Vince Williams comes in as The Rock instead of Stone Cold this time. I don't know. Just hang in there and have some optimism and realize, all these people that are talking smack in June and July and right now, they may go back into hiding like that Homer Simpson meme that goes back in the bushes come time it being October and November.
Yeah, it's the season of joy and happiness because nothing is yet been shown. And all you can have is optimism. So I get it. We have some of it ourselves. We don't 100% know anything, but neither does anybody else, which is a great deal of the point is trying to say there are reasons to be happy. There are reasons to look like things are better. And there are also reasons to not necessarily look at, certain other teams and go, it's all over. Why even bother playing the season? Because clearly it's all done.
And there's so much parity in the NFL, too, that even though, you make fun of some teams that have been a perennial doormat, obviously no one's making fun of Cleveland the way they used to, just based on the moves they made. But even the Bills or the Cardinals and the teams that are trying to sort that out and have new quarterbacks and, or younger quarterbacks, and you just never know where these teams are going to end up when it's all said and done. I don't think anybody thought that the Rams would jump in 2 years from post-Jeff Fisher era to being a Super Bowl contender, or even thinking, I wasn't a big fan of Jared Goff. And Jared Goff, here's a guy who threw some picks last year too. So, and they still did all right for themselves. So, this is like, you got to piece some of these things together. You got to make it comparable to other things you've seen in order to kind of get a grasp on how this could play out. And it just leads me to have some speculation about certain things with other teams. And I have that speculation thinking on a strong gut feeling of how the Steelers season is going to end up turning out, and believing that they're actually better and, as an underdog, maybe more dangerous, since so many people are talking smack and not believing in them. More dangerous in this upcoming 2019 season entering into it. And I think a lot of people, as we get closer, are going to be talking about Patriots, and that's going to start getting under their skin too. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Right now we feel pretty confident, but what happens if after weeks 1 and 2 they're 0-2?
I'm okay. There's going to be a lot of people crying to fire Mike Tomlin or fire Keith Butler or do anything like that. But weeks 1 and 2,
Patriots and Seahawks.
I was just about to say Seahawks at home. I don't know what the Seahawks team's going to be like, because they're long gone from Legion of Boom. So, just looking at it right now, it's hard to say. And the teams that play in September aren't the same teams that are playing in December and January either. And that's the reason why I won't necessarily write them off. 0-2 would be a bad hole to be in based on what the other teams might do. I think Cleveland could be even 1-1 at that point, but they might be 0-2 as well. And you're looking at them two as the bottom dwellers, and everybody's all of a sudden going to get on, to steal that term, get on the jock of, let's say, the Bengals shot out of a cannon at one point, if you don't remember, and they ended up lousy, or even the Ravens, and then the Ravens, fall apart here or there, or they turn it around and they fix things. So it's a constant ebb and flow. I don't, 0-2, I won't be in doom and gloom mode unless I see some very specific things. Let's say the secondary doesn't work out or Devin Bush doesn't work out as anticipated, or Roethlisberger can only complete like 45% of his passes because Juju's triple teamed and nobody else can catch the ball. It's got to be a collapse of that nature. And still, to that regard, I think it'll be practice, repetition, and guys getting together and gelling on the same page. And since the Steelers have more of those guys that have played together longer and have been on that same rapport for so long, that gives them, I think, an added benefit when you put that up against any of their other division opponents and many of the teams in the league, to be honest.
Yeah, my point was going to be, we could still have a team, because we've talked about how the first 4 games are really just an extension of the preseason for the starters. We could have a team that is, potentially 2-2 after 4 games, or 0-2 at the beginning of the season. And guess what? I'll still feel good. I won't be happy they lost, but I'll still feel good about projecting the season moving forward. Neither one of these beginning games are must-win games. There's no such thing as a must-win game one. I know people are going to say that Patriots game, they got to win so they can stay ahead of the Patriots and get that bye and all that stuff. But, and while it would be great, and I'm not picking them to lose it yet, it won't be the end of the world. So, a lot of things will change between now and week 3-4 of the regular season. And that's when we'll have a much clearer idea. And I know we're going to do a schedule show. I know we're going to do some stuff before camp. So we don't need to get into all of that now. But, I think it was important to point out that even if it doesn't come together as fast as we think, doesn't mean that by the end of the year, the Steelers haven't reclaimed the AFC North championship.
Yes, and I believe that's also because of some younger players may not get the call above some of the veterans they're competing with, which is kind of the MO of Mike Tomlin usually. So when you get to the bye, and then after that, you may start to see some guys like Deontay Johnson, maybe even Justin Lane, depending on how the secondary works out. Benny Snell may get mixed in. That's going to be a different dynamic with the team. It's going to be no different than the Ravens changing to Lamar Jackson last year and then having some of the success they did in order to salvage their season and win the division. So just, kind of based on that too, Brian, thanks once again for joining me as always. But I wanted to say there will be the naysayers, the extension of that preseason to early September. Don't forget the Steelers last year against the Chiefs, the year before against the Bears, the year before that against the Eagles, and the year before that against the Patriots. Always doom and gloom. There always seems to be some colossal collapse and butt spankings or games that's like, oh my God, we should have never lost that game. You know what I mean? It's just going to happen. That's football, and that's just the way it works. So, hey, buddy, we'll be back around. We got some more things to talk about. We're going to start talking about some guys to watch in camp and things of that nature. So looking forward to it, and thanks for joining me once again.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure, and we look forward to all the comments. And again, thanks for the subscriptions and the listens and the likes and the putting the bell on and whatever the heck else is a buzzword for the YouTube universe.
It's like, comment, and subscribe is what we try and say, and we appreciate everyone's support as always, and thanks for listening. My name's Joe, his name's Brian. Until next time, we encourage everyone to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.